Hydrangeas are one of the most popular landscaping shrubs due to their awesome overall appearance, great winter interest, shade tolerance, and of course those beautiful blooms. Luckily for those of us who prefer to landscape with native plants, there are 4 species of hydrangea native to the eastern United States that not only look great, but also provide for our pollinators and wildlife. I'm going to cover 3 species in depth and mention one briefly as it is not sold by many native plant nurseries. I'm also going to toss in some interesting hydrangea info that will help you make informed decisions when choosing hydrangeas for your yard. Let's get right into it and start with the most widespread native hydrangea species in eastern North America. The wild hydrangea, Hydrangea arborescens, also commonly called the smooth hydrangea, seven bark, or hills of snow, which can be found throughout much of the eastern United States, except some of the more northern states. It has a rounded, multi-stemmed, open growth habit and can grow from 3 to 5 feet tall with an equal spread. Wild hydrangea can handle partial shade to full sunlight, but will require more moisture in full sun locations. It does well in a wide variety of acidic to neutral, moist, well-drained soils. Unlike some hydrangea species, wild hydrangea blooms do not vary in color with soil pH, although there are cultivars with pink-colored blooms. More about wild hydrangea cultivars in a bit. The 2 to 6 inch diameter flat to round clusters of white blooms can be seen from May through July, depending on location, and will give way to small, rounded seed capsules that will ripen and turn brown in October to November. The dried seed heads and sterile flowers give it excellent winter interest in the landscape. Wild hydrangea blooms on new growth, so it can be pruned heavily in the late winter to help invigorate an older shrub. It is resistant to deer and rabbit browsing and is also salt tolerant. The blooms of the native hydrangeas are visited by a variety of pollinators, including bumblebees and other native bees, honeybees, and several species of butterflies. The foliage serves as a host plant for the spike-tailed caterpillars of the cool-looking Hydrangea Sphinx moth and the much smaller caterpillars of the Hydrangea leaf-tear moth. The small seeds are eaten by many species of songbirds and even small mammals such as field mice. Of course, being shrubs with dense foliage and multi-stem growth forms, the native hydrangeas are also great for providing cover to songbirds, small mammals, reptiles, and amphibians. If you love learning about our native shrubs that help support pollinators, pretend that like button is a cluster of hydrangea blooms, channel your inner bumblebee, and pollinate that like button. Probably the best known of our native hydrangeas is the Oakleaf hydrangea, Hydrangea quercifolia, which is named for its oak leaf-like foliage. Although this species is popular as a landscape plant and has been planted widely in the eastern United States, it has a small native range and is mostly confined to parts of central Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and southern Tennessee. This is a larger hydrangea and can grow from 4 to 8 feet tall with a 4 to 10 foot spread and has a pleasing rounded growth form. Oakleaf hydrangea grows natively in acidic, well-drained, moist sand or silt loams with a high amount of organic matter, but it is quite adaptable to other soil types when in cultivation. It can grow in partial shade to full sun, but should not be placed in too much shade or flowering will be impacted. The bloom period is long, and the pyramid-shaped 4 to 12 inch long clusters of white flowers may be present from May to August, depending on location. Oakleaf hydrangea blooms on older growth, so any pruning should be done immediately after flowering is finished for the year. The small round seed pods ripen in October or November and persist into winter along with the dry sterile flowers, adding winter interest along with Oakleaf hydrangea's cool-looking exfoliating bark. Many hydrangeas have lackluster fall color, but the Oakleaf hydrangea is an exception with beautiful fall foliage in shades of red and gold. While deer tend to leave most native hydrangeas alone, they do seem to have a taste for the flower buds and tender shoots of Oakleaf hydrangea, so keep that in mind when planting this shrub. If you've ever taken a close look at a hydrangea flower cluster, you probably noticed something interesting. There are 2 completely different looking types of flowers in them. Most of the time anyway. There are exceptions that I will get to in a bit. There are small, inconspicuous flowers in the center of the cluster and larger, showier flowers on the edge of the cluster. The smaller flowers are the fertile flowers. They are the ones the pollinators are visiting to gather pollen and sip nectar from. The large, showy flowers are sterile and provide nothing in the way of food for pollinators. They are simply there to catch the pollinator's eye and help guide them to the smaller, fertile flowers. These 2 types of flowers are going to come up again when we discuss Hydrangea cultivars. The snowy hydrangea, Hydrangea radiata, also commonly called the silverleaf hydrangea, gets its common names from the silvery undersides of its large heart-shaped leaves, which tend to flash in the breeze. This hydrangea has the smallest range of our native hydrangeas and is found in the area where the mountains of Tennessee, North Carolina, South Carolina, and a tiny corner of Georgia come together. Snowy hydrangea grows as an open, rounded crowned shrub with many unbranched stems and can reach a height of 3 to 8 feet with a 4 to 6 foot spread. It grows best in acidic, well-drained, medium moisture, silty loam soils in partial shade. The 3 to 6 inch wide clusters of white flowers bloom from May through July, depending on location. Blooms are produced on new growth, so snowy hydrangea can be pruned in late winter to promote new growth and more blooms. The seed pods ripen in October and November and will persist into the winter, along with any dried out sterile flowers, adding some great winter interest. I've mentioned pruning a couple of times, and if you're in need of a good pair of pruning shears to get the job done, you can see which ones we use here at Backyard Ecology, along with all of our other favorite equipment, field guides, nature books, and apps on the Backyard Ecology recommendations page. I will put a link to it in the description. I want to mention Ashy hydrangea, Hydrangea cinerea, which is also known as gray hydrangea, and Deems hydrangea. It gets the common name ashy or gray hydrangea from the grayish hairs that are on the lower surface of its leaves. While this is an attractive species, and it has a fairly large range in eastern North America, it is basically absent from the native plant trade. Hopefully this will change in the future, as it is a wonderful plant. There are a ton of cultivars of the native hydrangeas. Some are great for pollinators, and some not so much. It all comes down to those two types of flowers. Remember when I said we would come back to this? Some hydrangea cultivars have been selected to produce only sterile flowers, like this Hydrangea arborescens Annabelle, because they are showier. These cultivars offer zero pollen and nectar for pollinators. They still may be used as host plants, but for a pollinator garden, sterile flowered cultivars are not the best choice. Sterile cultivars have what are called Mophead flower clusters, or inflorescence to use the botanical term. They are called Mopheads because they are usually composed entirely of sterile flowers, which give them a full rounded appearance. Mopheads may at times have a few scattered fertile flowers, but they are usually totally obscured by the abundant sterile flowers and unavailable to pollinators. There are also cultivars that have what are called Lacecap inflorescences, which have the normal arrangement of small fertile flowers in the center and large sterile flowers around the edge, resulting in a flower head that resembles lace. There may be more sterile flowers than in wild types, but they do not block the fertile flowers from pollinator access. Lacecap cultivars in general are good choices for the pollinator garden, as are any of the wild types. There are way too many cultivars of native hydrangeas to cover in a single video. But lucky for us, the folks at the Mount Cuba Center have done a bunch of research on them. If you want to know if a particular native hydrangea cultivar is going to be good for pollinators, just go to your search engine, type in Mount Cuba Center hydrangea, and then the cultivar name. And if they have done research on it, it should pop up in the search. As popular as the wild hydrangeas are in landscaping, a shrub that is planted even more is the super popular rose. And just like hydrangeas, we have several awesome native species that go great in a pollinator garden. And you can learn all about 6 of them in this video, and be sure to get out and explore nature in your backyard.